you doing well? Thank you very much for all the messages about the Norway series. We don't normally get a lot of messages being sent to us, but we got a lot of them as we're putting this series out, with people asking how did we arrange it, what did we do, how did we find the accommodation, and more importantly sort of how much did it cost. So bearing in mind so many people have sent us messages, I thought it would be a good opportunity to put a quick video out to take you through the costing. So what I'll try and do is I'll try and take you through in as much detail as possible what it cost us in terms of the details of what we were getting for our money, and then obviously it's going to be individual for you. You might spend a bit more or a bit less, but this is the costing for our 23-day trip to Norway and the Arctic Circle for me, Jazz and my dad. And just to let you know that these costs are based on August and September 2023. So first things first, before we get into the costing, was August and September a good time to go? Well, basically it was partially in peak and partially off peak, so August was a bit more expensive, and then into September that was a bit less expensive. And we did get really changeable weather, which we've been told from a lot of the locals that we spoke to, that's about right for that time of year. So if you're going to go at that time of year, make sure you pack waterproofs. and we had everything from sort of 20 degrees to down to having frost on the bikes in the morning when we got up, and sun and rain and everything in between. So if you are going to go that time of year, make sure you pack something for basically every weather. But one great thing about going at that time of the year was all the midges were dead. So, when we were around a lot of water, which there is in Norway, we weren't getting bitten a lot. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good time of year to go. So getting into the costing, I thought we'd start off with looking at the boats. So I'll do this in two sections. Number one, the main sort of boats to get between countries, and number two, the boats that were getting us, around Norway, and then a couple of boats we took in Germany as well. So for the main crossings, which were Harwich to Hook of Holland, return, and Hertures to Christie and Sand, return, just to give you a bit of an idea, the Harwich to Hook of Holland boat was £296 per person return. That was sharing a 3-berth cabin. And the Hertures to Christie and Sand, return, to take us from Denmark to Norway, which was the fast crossing, was £134 per person return. Now, the way we book that is we use a company called Sports Travel Solutions. I'll put their details up on the screen. I contact a lady there called Julie, and Julie's been organising all of our boats for all of our tours for years, because two reasons. Number one, she gets great discounts with the ferry providers, which always saves me a couple of quid, and I think she always gets better rates than I can. And number two, when I'm booking for a group of people, rather than having to book 3 bookings, and then sometimes you have to go onto the ferry's website and attach them all, and then put your details in, and then put the registration numbers on. I can just tell her what I want, send her the details of all the riders and all the bikes. She puts it on for us, and gets us a really good deal. So as I say, the Harwich to Hook of Holland was £296 per person, and the Hertures to Christie and Sand, return £134 per person. So there were a couple of ferries that we took in Germany to get across Germany, and then there were the boats, obviously quite a lot of them inland ferries in Norway. So there's not much detail in terms of the ones in Germany. You basically get on them and then you pay for them, and they take card or cash, between sort of €5 and €10 each, and not that much of a problem. But for Norway, what I'd recommend you do is you go to the Ferry Pay website and you set up a Ferry Pay account, and what you do is you can put your registration number and some card details on, and then as you go on, someone with it's like a little mobile phone thing reads your number plate, like an ANPR thing, and it takes your number plate, registers you've got an account, and automatically pays. Saves the faff of having to get your card out or having to get cash out, and it also means that you get it a bit cheaper because there is a slightly higher charge if you pay as you go. We've also had a couple of people getting on and getting off, and then when they get home they get sent to them an invoice plus an invoice charge. So definitely go on Ferry Pay. You can set the start and end date of your account, and it was a really easy way to do it. Do be aware of the fact you need to set it up about in advance, about 48 hours before you use it. It was approximately about £60 per person over the entire trip through Germany, up through Norway and back, and all the different ferries we used for those. And then we did book, and you'll see it on one of the videos, last minute we decided, rather than taking the road out of Gerangerfjord, because the weather was really, really bad and it was foggy, and a lot of the locals were saying that road wasn't great in the bad weather, we decided to take the boat that took you up through the fjord and out of Geiranger the other way, and it was like sort of an hour's scenic cruise up, and then it deposited you at the other end of the fjord so you could ride out. Beautiful scenery, gorgeous. I definitely recommend, if you don't want to, if the weather's bad or you'd rather not do the road out of Geiranger again. Absolutely fantastic. And that worked out to £47 a person, and it was really worth doing. So for accommodation, we tended to focus on self-catering accommodation for Norway, and the reason that we did that was because we had been told how expensive it was to eat out in Norway. So to give you some idea, we had 20 nights accommodation in total, because although we were away for 23 days, obviously one day was getting back home, and then 2 days were on the boat. Out of the 20 days total, we made sure that we had self-catering facilities on as many nights as possible. So we actually had self-catering facilities for 19 days of that. One we didn't. And what I did was I went on the booking.com for most of it, and what I do is I go on, put in the dates I want, put in the rough area I want, filter on the minimum number of rooms, then filter free parking, filter self-catering, and filter free cancellation. Now I always, and maybe I'm a bit paranoid, but always check out the parking in the photos to make sure they've got something. And if I'm not sure after I've booked, I message the property and just ask what they've got available. And a lot of the time they'll get back in touch with you and go, look, we've got a garage, you can use the garage, or they'll send you information about it. Then what I'll do is, once I've filtered by those filters, I'll put it in price order. Now I tend to have a bit of a rule. I ignore anything where the ratings on booking.com aren't sort of at least an 8 overall, because we've stayed in some that are less than an 8, and they've been a bit grubby or a bit lacking in other ways. So filter it by less than 8, and I'll go through and I'll pick some accommodation and then double check with Jazz and my dad that they're happy with those bits of accommodation. Be careful if you're booking cabins in Norway. I did book some cabins. They tend to be easier to book direct than on booking.com, so some of the cabins you stay in. But do bear in mind that the cabins widely vary in terms of the facilities. So we did see a couple that looked like good value, but the facilities do vary. So some of them are literally just bunk beds in a hut with, and you have to walk across the campsite to go and use your shower and go and use the toilet. So do be very careful of what ones you want. And also, if it is a cabin and self-catering in Norway, it seems to be a Norway thing where not all of them include bed linen and towels and things. So if you want those, make sure you know how much that's going to cost you on top of it. Message them to ask if it's included or not. So what we did was we made sure that everywhere we stayed included bed linen and was included in the cost. If it's not listed, just message the property through booking.com. And a total cost for our accommodation for 20 nights accommodation was £855 per person. and in near enough everywhere that was two bedrooms at least in the property that we had. There was, I think, maybe 2 of them where my dad had to have a sofa bed in the living room. But yeah, £855 for 20 nights accommodation didn't seem terrible. So getting to food, one of the things that I was told by an acquaintance of mine from Norway was it can be very, very expensive if you eat out. So what we tended to do was we tended to try and stick with self-catering, and we mapped out and made sure that we knew where one of the local supermarkets were. So the ones we were using were things like Kiwi, Rima 1000, Co-op Mini Price, I think that's how you pronounce it, or one of the others that were there. And then by doing that we could get enough food for 3 people and then just split the price across the 3 people. So just to give you a bit of a breakdown as to what we did, so 15 evenings we self-catered and 7 nights we ate out, but that does include some meals out in Germany and Denmark. We also only had breakfasts at the accommodation, provided by the accommodation for 2 days. For 20 days we self-catered the breakfast, whether that be croissants or cooking a breakfast or pastries or whatever. And we did sort of eat out 5 times at lunchtime, just stop and get lunch, but we actually self-catered 18 lunches, so we were getting things the night before, getting bread and things for sandwiches and crisps or salad pots or whatever, and making them up. And we made lunch to take out most days. We also carried flasks with us and carried milk with us so that we could make the coffee before we left in the morning, and weren't having to pay for it at lunchtime. We could just stop and have a coffee at lunchtime. Now that might seem stingy, but in Norway there's loads of places to stop and enjoy the stunning views. And while there's toilets at a lot of them, there's not always somewhere to get a drink and food. So what it allowed us to do was find the most stunning places and just sit and have lunch. So I'd recommend taking a flask, and you can some of the fjords you can sit and have lunch at, just absolutely stunning. So I definitely recommend that. If you are self-catering though, in Germany and Norway, supermarkets and most shops are closed on a Sunday. So if you are going to do that, then plan ahead. So for instance, when we were heading to Gerangerfjord on Sunday, we'd self-catered the night before up near Bergen, and what we did was we bought a load of extra veg, chopped it all up, put it in a container, bought some extra pasta and a bit of pasta sauce, so we had something for the Sunday night. So it's well worth bearing in mind that if you are going to self-cater, make sure the supermarkets aren't open on a Sunday, and if you aren't going to self-cater, make sure that there's things in the area that are open. A lot of the restaurants are. So, as I say, food worked out at about £460 per person for the 23 days, and that includes the evening meals and the breakfasts and the lunches, mostly self-catering, but with a couple of eat-outs in there as well. So an easier one to cover is probably fuel. We did just over 4,200 miles, and it was a cost of about £620 per person approximately. Now, yeah, it is more expensive than at home, and we went at a time when fuel prices were particularly high anyway. You can get E10 everywhere. E5 is a bit harder to get in places. Make sure you've got a good credit card with you, because a lot of them are the ones that are automated, where there is no shop to go in and pay, particularly on Sundays when a lot of shops are shut. And don't worry about the availability of fuel. A couple of people said, "Oh, you're going to Norway, is fuel availability going to be okay?" It was absolutely fine, as I say, provided you don't mind using the self-service ones. So yeah, fuel, pretty easy. Take into account obviously what miles per gallon your bike will do. One last thing I would say in terms of mileage though, whatever you know about doing mileages on tour when you go to Norway, forget it. I'd normally be happy doing about 300 miles in a day. you can halve that if you want a nice day in Norway, because the scenery is so lovely. You'll want to stop everywhere to take a look. Loads of photo opportunities, but a lot of the roads are very, very slow and very, very twisty. And we did see a lot of police enforcing the speed limits as well, so it's not as if you can go faster. So I would say, you know, whatever mileage you normally like to do in a day, if you're going to Norway, times it by 2/3, and that's realistically what I would take on in a day in Norway. Now that's the main stuff, but there were a few extras put in there. So for instance, we took the rib ride, so the rigid inflatable speedboat at Garanga. That was really good value. Recommend you do that if you're in the area. It goes out in the morning. We'll tell you all about the history of the area and a lot of the Norwegian folklore. That was £46 per person. They provide dry suits for you to be in and glasses and everything else. So amazing to do, £46. I'd say it's a must do if you're in the area. And souvenirs and presents, I'll be honest, we didn't spend much on this because it's so expensive to buy things like that over there. But in terms of things like Jazz needing some fridge magnets and us getting some stickers, and you can get a certificate stamp to say you've crossed the Arctic Circle at the Arctic Circle Visitor Centre, and then we bought some presents to bring people home as well. That worked out about another £40 per person. And then sundries, so just on a couple of days where it was particularly wet and cold, where we wanted to sit inside, and we went in and bought a tea or a coffee, or a couple of places where we just wanted to grab an extra snack because it was a longer day. And on one day we had a little bit of water got into something, so we needed a can of WD-40, and just things like that. So I'm not 100% sure what we spent on that, but just looking at the cash we spent, I've sort of said for little extras like that over the 3 weeks, just to allow an extra £40 per person is what we allowed. Okay, so this next one's going to be harder for me to quantify because everyone's going to be different. So I've averaged it out across the three of us, because obviously between the three of us we've got, you know, different ages, different pre-existing health conditions, different genders, so a wide range of things. So what I've done is that our holiday insurance cost us about £145 per person on average. Now just be careful of any motorcycle clauses. I had to switch ours from the provider that we normally use because they've changed their motorcycle policy and we wouldn't have been covered. So do check with your policy and make sure that's okay. And we have a separate breakdown policy rather than it being covered in our bike insurance. So it was to upgrade for the top level of cover with Green Flag. Cost us £130 per person to upgrade for the full top level breakdown, repatriation, everything else covered for that. Okay, I just spent 5 minutes going back to my computer, double checking those figures, and we get back to a figure of £2,873 per person for our 23-day trip to Norway in August and September of 2023. We feel like we got a lot for the money. We feel like it was an excellent trip and we all really enjoyed it, and we all absolutely love to go back and do it again. So there's a couple of things that you probably noticed weren't in our budget that may be in yours, and unfortunately we can't comment on how much they would cost. So things like you know, alcohol, we don't really drink, so didn't encounter that. You'd have to do your own research if that wanted to be part of your budget. As well as that, staying in major cities, which we didn't really do. We like to be out in the countryside. So again, couldn't tell you how much more your budget would be if you wanted to stay in one of the major cities. So hopefully you found this video useful. If you've got any questions on anything we've gone through or anything we might be able to help with, you know the email, baconbiketours@hotmail.com. Feel free to get in touch. Other than that, channel's growing, nearly 1,000 subscribers now. We'd really appreciate your help to get us there. So if you would like and subscribe, if you haven't already, that would be fantastic. And happy touring in 2024.